I'm Woody Huffines. I own the NerdsToGo in McKinney and Frisco, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. Will this Internet of Things security problem ever get any better? In my estimation, the Internet of Things security problem will get better because, if nothing else, it has to. Gartner Group, which is a research firm, a consulting research firm in the IT space, says that by the end of 2021, there will be 25 billion Internet of Things connected devices. Statistica, who's another one of the research firms that do research on IT issues, says that by 2025, there'll be 75 billion Internet of Things connected devices. Now, when you add that up with the fact that the Internet of Things connected device hacks and attacks last year went up by 300%. If it doesn't get better, people are going to stop using the darn thing. So how is the problem going to be solved? Or how is the Internet of Things security going to get better? Well, one path to that getting better is a government standard. If the government comes out with standards that says this is what you have to do to have a device that you can sell, it's just like a safety thing. That's one of the ways that it can happen. In the UK and in Australia, they've made moves in that direction where they've issued guidance for what an Internet of Things device needs to have in terms of security features for it to be sold in Great Britain. In the case of the UK, there's three things that they're going to require. First, that each device has a unique password, and that's a unique password to each device, as opposed to, as we've talked about before, and the playlist is up here, I don't remember which video it was in. If you have a default password or a default admin account on each device, then it's resettable, and somebody can get into your device because they know what the password and username is for the admin account for all of them. So to sell something in the UK, each device is going to have its own password. Instead of one admin passwords for all, it'll have to be effectively a randomly generated username and password for each device. The UK's second requirement is that there's a public contact for that device, so that there's somebody that you can reach out to or that can be reached out to if a vulnerability is found so they can fix the vulnerability. And the third thing they want is for there to be a minimum amount of time that that device will continue to receive security updates. So if something does go wrong, that can be updated. Right now, it's not law in Great Britain. It's just a voluntary thing that they're talking about doing, and they may put into law. But it's a start, because we're now starting to talk about some kind of standards that other people can look at to say, this is a best practice for an Internet of Things device for the Internet of Things security. Last month, here in the United States, California and Oregon enacted Internet of Things security requirements for things to be sold in California and Oregon. Now, if you're in New Jersey, you may think, well, why do I care? Well, California is a big enough market that manufacturers and retailers of these devices have reason to go do the things they need to do to make this stuff saleable in California. So the California law, which went into effect last month, is a step in the right direction in terms of getting American companies or companies that do business in America to start paying attention to Internet of Things security. There's a couple of things about the California law. The first is that the definition of an Internet of Things connected device is very, very broad. It is any device that connects either through Bluetooth or a bridge or the Wi-Fi to the Internet. So it's effectively anything that connects directly to the Internet or indirectly to the Internet. For example, we've got a really cool ring that does all kind of biohacking stuff in it. And it connects to my phone with Bluetooth, and then the application on the phone connects someplace else. So by the California law, my ring would be one of those things that is controlled by the security features that you need to have to go do the things that you need to do to your device to sell it in California. That's a very broad definition, which I don't think is such a bad idea, because if the Internet is in that chain anywhere, you can get hacked, whether it's an interim device or a Bluetooth device that's between the device that we're talking about and the Internet. The second issue that some people have with the California law is what they say is that you have to have reasonable security controls. Well, who defines what reasonable is? And that's where the law is definitely very broadly written and will be subject to a lot of discussion. The first thing is that it is reasonable for the device in question. So Who determines what is reasonable for a security camera versus a Fitbit that you wear on yourself versus a Hue light bulb that changes colors? So what is the security that's appropriate for the device or the type of device? This is especially true given that even if a device doesn't have any personally identifiable information and the device itself is not connected to the internet, it's connected to a hub. If somebody can hack through the device to the hub to get to your internet, then it's important to have it secured. So although it's broad, it may be useful. The second piece that they ask for is that it secures the data that the device transmits, that it secures the data that the device transmits back to the Bluetooth app, that it secures the information from the Bluetooth app onto the internet. So if you have a cloud storage of the data that that device collects, like my Ring's got a cloud storage, so it would be subject to a design that protected the data that would be collected by a biometric device for the level of privacy or concern that you have for that device. And then the third thing is that whatever security you put in is designed to protect the device and the security. So that's kind of the California law in a nutshell. And there hasn't been much written about what the penalties would be, but the good thing is that California is a large enough market that the manufacturers are going to have to play nice if they want to sell things in California. Next, we have NIST, or the National Institute of Standards. The National Institute of Standards and Testing is one of those government agencies that talks about standards and communications, and they have now issued draft 2 of their their Internet of Things security proposal, and really it's a government agency and it's pretty much godmotherhood and apple pie. Do good. Find out what the security risks are, design for those security risks, find out what you're trying to do for the end customer, communicate to that customer, and how do you build that in the manufacturing process. Duh. Every piece of software that's been built in the last 60 years has had all of that as part of the development process. So this isn't a new thing. Not helpful, but at least they're talking about it. Finally, and I think possibly the biggest advantage that we may have in the near future, is a standards body. Amazon, Apple, Google, and Zigbee is probably the biggest player in the hub piece. Remember when we talked about that your light bulb may have to talk to the hub, which talks to the internet? Well, the Zigbee and Z-Wave were the two big players in that. So Amazon, Apple, Google, and Zigbee are now looking at an internet standard, and they're calling it an IP-connected home standard, so that instead of Amazon, Apple, Google, and Zigbee manufacturers trying to rule the world and capture all of the devices in your home, they've talked about building a standard so that, say it ain't so, you could have interoperability between your Nest thermostat that Google sells and your Amazon Echo that Amazon sells, so that you don't have to do a whole bunch of other stuff in between. This is potentially really good for 3 reasons. The first is a lot of these devices use skills, which are third-party applications that allow your Amazon device to talk to the Google device through a loop that goes out on the internet, and those have proven to be pretty insecure. So if they directly communicate to each other instead of using a third-party application, that takes one leg of the threat vector out of the calculation, that you don't have to worry about that you're getting a threat because you put a skill on your device to kind of go around the fact that your devices don't play well together. The second piece is they have agreed that it will be open source with secure end-to-end encryption. And open source means that anybody can look at the source code, that programming isn't secret. One of the problems that you have with security on just any device is if you can't look at the source code, you don't know what that source code is doing. And if you can't see what the program's doing, you might find out that the program's doing something to you that you didn't know about. So if it's open source, people can look at it, and if it's built for end-to-end secure encryption, that's a win. And third, this standard that Amazon, Apple, Google, and Zigbee are working on will support the common things that we all have in our lives, which is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So if we can get to a standard that's open source and secure, that Amazon's not trying to rule the world by selling all the devices, and Google's not trying to rule the world by selling all the devices, and Apple, so if they're interoperable, maybe then we can get to the point that there's some security that can be done, because we're only talking about one standard, and it's the one that the big players agree to. This is also going to help in the long term when industry begins using more Internet of Things devices in industry, so that it's not just a smart home thing, which is another thing that will drive the security, because large corporations don't want to have insecure devices on their network that can get them hacked. So do I think that the Internet of Things security problem will get better? Absolutely I do. If for nothing else, it's going to have to, or people are going to quit buying the things. I'm Woody Huffines. This is Tech for the Untechnical. I own the NerdsToGo in McKinney and Frisco, Texas. If you find this information helpful, hit the subscribe button below, mash the notification bell, hit the thumbs up, share it with your friends, and join us next time.